very honored to have Ruth Butler give a presentation. She's got a fascinating research program, and obviously she'll only be able to touch a little bit on it. If you look at her CV, the Meyer-Hoff Chair of the Seymour Fox School of Education. Now, we really clearly have something to learn from. Obviously, we would take some lessons and have some people give sell some media rights. Undoubtedly, that would get us out of some of our financial difficulties, but nevertheless. Ruth did a PhD at Hebrew University, where she's at now. She did a postdoc at Berkeley and has had visiting appointments at just a huge variety of different prestigious universities: Berkeley, Stanford, Columbia, the University of Michigan, University of Pennsylvania, Max Planck Institute. Now, Ruth and I first met, like many of the people who have come here as visiting scholars and professorial fellows. Ruth was one of the early keynote speakers at one of our self-conferences, and will be at the next self-conference as well. And so the research that she does is quite fascinating in relation to many of the interests around here. She's looking at motivation from a variety of different perspectives, particularly from a developmental sort of perspective, but bridging between experimental and survey sort of work. So she's looking at some of the goal theory sorts of perspectives, but looking at it at a different way than some of them here, looking in issues of self-belief. And so her interests overlap with some of the self-concept focus that we have here. So there's a whole variety of different points that interface. So with that, it's really nice to be able to invite Ruth to give us a presentation. And so I'll have her come up with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So for years I worked on student. I'm sitting in the wrong place.
Let's see.
I see that. I want to see who I'm talking to as well. Well, all right. So I've worked on student motivation, on the development of motivation, social comparison, connections between them. And on the whole, I found classical goal theory like a fruitful way of thinking about these kinds of issues. And my preferred methods are experimental. And it took me years to go beyond thinking about teachers as just as people who influence student motivations, not always good at that. To think about them as like individuals in their own right, and to start wondering about teacher motivation. So as a good academic, once I started wondering about that, whoops. Sorry about this. I went to the literature, which I found very sparse. This is about a decade ago, and very boring. Really, it was exploratory, it was non-conceptual, lots of little weak studies, looking at motivation just like as an outcome, and then, just how much rather than what was the quality. And so, what was to be done. And interestingly enough, at the same time, the same kind of penny dropped with some other people. And what we all did was basically to go back to the general theories of class motivation that we knew, and to start wondering or applying them to teachers. And in my case, the basic idea was that schools are achievement arenas for teachers, not just for students. And so it might be interesting to think about achievement goals. And the basic questions are, obvious. Do teachers pursue distinct personal achievement goals? And if so, do teacher achievement goals matter? And here I come from the basic idea of course, that goals organize kind of systems of meaning and behavior. And if they do matter, then what influences them? Now, I'm not going to be able to do all that today, but the story I want to tell is to show you how I started off, which was basically directly extrapolating from theory and research on student motivation to teachers, to show a little bit where that has taken me and taken the field, and then to start critiquing this. And so that title is really long. Hopefully you didn't manage to get it all, because it's going to take me a while to get to that full title. So bear with me. All right. So, proof of concept. Are they distinct achievement goals for teaching? And here, influenced by Nichols, I developed a self-report, measure of goal orientations for teaching, which begins with, when do you feel successful? And the direct extrapolation is that I was only thinking about mastery goals, which I regret to this day that I do not call learning goals, ability, approach, and avoidance goals, or performance goals, for the issue is ability, and also work avoidance goals to minimize effort of work. And the question was, would these load on distinct factors and constitute an acceptable model? And the initial findings were encouraging, and scales were reliable, and intercorrelations, at least at the zero order level, were moderate. Now, in the same paper, the second part of proof of concept was, do they matter? And the idea being goals orient students, and therefore also teachers, to different systems of meaning and action. And here again, I extrapolated from my own work on help-seeking perceptions, preferences, and behaviors, where fairly consistently, my analysis has shown that mastery goals orient students to perceive help-seeking as beneficial for learning, to be willing to seek needed help, and to prefer autonomous rich help that can promote future independent kind of learning. Ability, especially avoidance goals, are going to orient students to see help-seeking as a threat to self-esteem, mission of inadequate ability, and thus to avoid help-seeking. Work avoidance are going to lead to perceptions that it's worth asking for help if it will save you time and bother. And so to expedient references to get someone else to solve the problem for you. And I asked, will this be the case for teachers? And if so, then preliminary evidence that teacher goals matter. And incidentally, also a framework for studying teacher help-seeking, because it turned out that no one had done that before. Subsample of the teachers also completed measures of help-seeking, and more or less at the same time, we did a replication study in Germany. So just a quick look at the kinds of measures we had, all right? Perceptions, preferences, frequency, and did goal orientations orient teachers to different help-seeking perceptions, preferences, and frequencies. And as you can see, can you see? Not clear enough? Yeah, it was very key. Mastery oriented teachers to perceive help-seeking as beneficial, to offer autonomous help. Down there? Pointer? There we go. Okay, down there, all right? And moderately to ask for help. Ability avoidance, strongly associated with help seeking. If you ask for help, colleagues might think you're incompetent. And reluctance, basically help avoidance. And work avoidance, worth asking for help if it saves you time and bother. I prefer to refer my disruptive students to others. Okay? Note, ability approach wasn't predicting anything, so I omitted the next step. And then, we looked at the mediation process, whereby mastering, for example, frequency of help seeking, mastering frequency of help seeking, and ability avoidance predicts for avoidance, and that goes through perceived benefits versus threats. More or less the same picture for autonomous help seeking, and expedient help seeking again, direct relation, somewhat less moderated, mediated by perceptions. Okay? So this is totally in line with theoretical predictions, and it's replicated to the German research service teachers, replicates the many studies with students. So, initial proof of concept. Now, even in the early days when I was so busy extrapolating from students, I didn't realize that teachers teach. And so one should also look at whether goals matter, not just for them, but for the way they behave in class, and from here also for their students. And so continuing the help-seeking theme, the reasoning was that if mastery-oriented teachers engage themselves in constructive help-seeking, they should be more likely to support student question asking and help seeking, and promote the student's intentions to actually turn to the teacher, for help or for explanations when necessary. And ability avoidance should have the opposite effect. They should be more likely also to convey to students that help seeking is a sign of inadequate ability, and encourage help avoidance. And he'll use a multi-level design. I'll describe it because there's more like that further on. So we had 52 teachers and their students in middle schools. A light class I'll explain when we recruited teachers and asked them if they would let us into their classes. We didn't want them to choose the class. And so we got them to list their classes, and because we think that it makes a difference if you like for you to apply teaching in the class, then they actually noted by each if they liked it or they didn't like it so much. And here we wanted to see teachers in a sense at their best, so we went into the light classes. The teachers completed the GOT early in the year, and at the end of the year, students reported on the teacher's support for question asking and help seeking, their inhibition of question asking and help seeking, and their own intentions to ask the teacher for help and explanations should they need it. Okay? And the ICCs justify multi-level analysis, just about the help seeking, certainly for reports of the teacher's behavior. Okay? Do stop me if something's not clear. So far, so good? Good. And results, preliminary means as outcomes models, He had no effective ability approach again or work avoidance, but mastery and ability avoidance. So, mastery is associated with these are between class differences in teacher support, negatively the teacher inhibition, and the opposite for ability avoidance. Alright, so teacher goal orientations at the beginning of the year are predicting coherently student reports of how that teacher behaves in class at the end of the year, which is, I think, fairly impressive, though I might be biased. The interesting thing, I have an attraction to anomalous results. You know, when something doesn't come out. So, an interesting thing was that then they should have, mastery goals should have predicted actual intentions of policy, but they didn't. Okay? And this is a puzzle to which we shall return. Okay. Now, before we do, I want to spend 5-6 minutes or so just reviewing what we have learned in the meantime. All right, this is 2007, and this kind of caught on. And it caught on, I think, because it was slightly uncharted territory, this whole business of teacher motivation, and here was something that seemed to be working, and there were lots of people looking for, you know, something to research. So it caught on. And meanwhile, there have been something like 40 plus published studies in 10 different countries over 4 continents, including Australia. Very few, and I'll return to this, probably too much, very few multi-level and multi-informed studies. Almost all of them, teachers surveyed in a single session, some measure of goal orientations and some measure of something. Okay? Now, this is very limited. But what we learned from this is repeated confirmation of chapter structure, of the GOT, and other measures that have been developed, and I'll talk about them a bit later on. And it's, because, you know, the designs are all identical, it enables ongoing meta-analysis of associations with teacher-reported evidence. Okay? I say ongoing because, you know, we keep doing this, and then we wait a bit because more studies come out, and at some point we have to say stop. So this is one of the numbers I gave at the beginning are good from up until about so, do goals matter? Lots of people have looked at coping and avoidance. Lots of studies of hope seeking and hope avoidance. Far too many, in my view. But anyway. Also, participation versus avoidance in professional development opportunities, feedback seeking versus avoidance. And so, I realized, what didn't I write down here? Problem-focused versus emotion-focused strategies for coping with difficulties, which is, I really like. So if you put all those together, then you can see, you know, these are respectable. Mastery goes with constructive, you know, strategies, and all the others to one greater or lesser extent with avoidant or less constructive or emotion-focused. And both avoidance with expedient, that's if we study on proximity. Continuing, something of interest to you people, engagement and well-being. So positive engagement is interest, enthusiasm, job satisfaction. Burnout, negative is kind of burnout. That's mainly what we will be looking at. And as you can see, as one would expect. Okay? Mastery, good. avoidance goals, especially work avoidance, not so. Right? Lots of people, again and again, looking at goals and self-efficacy. I find this too interesting, but it is, again, as one makes it. Right? And more or less parallel to what happens with students. I said I didn't talk about heterogeneity, but there is considerable heterogeneity here, which is maybe interesting. And last but not least, goals and approaches to instruction. We were talking about teachers' reports about what they do in their classes. And so I have a kind of mastery cluster here, which is the PAL stuff about emphasizing effort and progress, but also people who look at learning for understanding, autonomy support, cognitive stimulation, constructive, student-centered, individualized evaluation, like that kind of good teaching, if I may say so. And the performance, which is the PAL's, emphasis on superior performance and ability, controlling, which teacher-centered, normative evaluation, those kinds of things. And across different countries, with very different systems, and we have a couple of studies from China in there too, and teacher types, pre-service, in-service, and college instructors. Also, longitudinal studies take that out, because I haven't only one was done, something like that, very few of those. And again, mastery goals predict mastery practices, and all the others predict performance controlling kind of practices, and there's ample evidence that the mastery clusters are the students. Okay? So far so good. But, where is the critique? You ask. And what about striving to connect? Extrapolating from teachers to students, from students to teachers, fails to consider that teachers and students are not the same. There are differences between student and teacher roles, and from here, maybe consider this. And teaching is an inherently teaching person, and not just person. In a way that learning isn't. Learning can be social, but achievement is excellent. And from here, the quality of the relationships one creates with students is an aspect, a criteria, a dimension of professional competence, success, and I believe achievement. So from here, I invented a new goal. Driving to connect, and this is a relational goal orientation for teaching. The goal is to achieve and sustain caring relationships with students. Okay? And I emphasize I'm looking at this as an achievement goal, which achievement goal here is really looking. But for teachers, I think that's the case. And all of those studies that enable the meta-analysis, the reliance on teacher perspectives in reports, the subjective perceptions of teachers, really follows the design of choice for students. But again, teaching is for a necessity for students. And so I think one has to include them into the equation of, the implications of achievement goals. And so are teaching goal orientations related to student perceptions of teachers' classroom behaviors and instructional practices? We have one hint already that they are, one is enough. And does this work via teacher approaches to instructions? Or maybe it works better, because at least, and what Helen has to say about this, but at least in school age samples, teacher and student reports are often really poorly correlated. You know, they see different things. So, striving to learn and striving to connect. So I expand the goal to include relational goal items. My main goal as a teacher is to create caring relationships with students, have a successful day in my school, and to develop close relationships with students. Again, I look at the expanded framework, and I'm particularly interested in the possibly unique contribution of relational goals to teacher approaches. Predicting makes sense that relational goals will orient teachers to provide social emotional support to their students, to actually care for them. Whereas mastery goals, as we've already seen, should be more associated with mastery kind of instruction.
Ruth, have you also considered helping students develop relationships with their peers as part of this?
I do have some measures of that, which we haven't really looked at yet. And maybe later on, we will some good ideas. But that would be another carry-on. We have a measure that we took from the Max Planck about the degree to which the teacher prioritizes like social relationships over subject matter or vice versa.
Because I think it's clearly related to
It is.
caring relationships with the students.
I agree. And study 2, multi-level, we look at teaching goal orientations as predictors of student reports of social support, master instruction, and okay, the same kind of idea. So we have teachers and we have teacher-class pairs. Time 1, teachers respond to a lot. Time 2, several months later, we have a subsample reporting about their approaches in general, and we have the teachers and students reporting about the teaching in the target class, about mastery practices and performance practices, that's from the PALS, social support, and we invented something called low demands, because I thought that might be predictive by performance. All right? I demand very much of students, I don't think they do too much homework, such like. And so, are relational strivings a distinct class of goals, and to the extent that the measure is known on a separate factor and does the model, fit, then yes. They're only moderately correlated with mastery goals, which is good. And it's not just social desirability. At the beginning I was thinking, who would not agree with these items? But as you can see, agreement is consistent with here and the other studies, actually a bit lower in mastery goals. And did those predict approaches to teaching several months later? Yes. Right? Still. But, look at this. When you put them both in together, it's the relational goals that are also predicting the mastery approach and the mastery business. Okay? So, this is intriguing, in case you hadn't noticed. And we will pursue this thought. But before we do that, student reports and ICCs again, good, and so forth. Little modeling. Again, ability, well, not again, but ability and work avoidance goals didn't predict between class variance in student reports. And as I'll say at the end, this is something I keep finding and I don't understand it. I would like you to think about it so you can explain it to me when we open discussions. Nothing predicted student perceptions of performance practices. Look at this. Teacher reports didn't significantly predict student reports. So when you're getting teachers reporting about what they do in this particular class, and you get students reporting what the teacher is doing in this particular class, not significantly suspected. And this is a common picture. Right? So basically, made it easy. I tested only the main predictions for the mastery of relational goals, and I added on the low demands. And did teachers' goals differentially predict student reports? Guess what? Relational goals is the star, all right? It predicts student reports and social support. Also are mastery practices, and it's not just because teachers have low demands and are being, nice to the students are not demanding anything, because that's actually negative. So this seems consistent and it is intriguing. So relational goals really matter, but mastery goals don't. And what happened, you remember, you probably don't, but I'll remind you. What happened to that effect size of 0.3 from the meta-analysis? So is it because this study was longitudinal? Goals at the beginning of the year, practices at the end of the year? Maybe. Or because the mastery practices assessed by the PALs are actually assessing academics. I consider students' effort when, evaluating them, and encourage, them to progress, and so on and so forth. Whereas quite a few of the studies in the meta-analysis are actually assessing more kinds of cognitively stimulating instruction, challenging instruction, autonomous learning, like more instruction. Now, what we found was that students don't distinguish between social support and mastery teaching. They learn it the same. Okay? And it turns out that we are not the only ones to find that. That seems to be the case. But we thought students might well distinguish between social support and cognitively stimulating instruction as being not just the same thing. So if so, we can go back onto differential predictions with relational goal predicting social support, mastery goal predicting cognitively stimulating instruction, and if so, should have differential consequences for student engagement with relational goal predicting student help seeking via social support. Because who are you going to ask for help? Someone who you trust to care for you. Whereas mastery goal will predict students' interest in the class, and that via this kind of cognitively stimulating or interesting instruction. Okay? And so this might solve the puzzle. Why mastery goal didn't predict student health seeking. So this time we have 51 teacher class pairs, And again, we targeted light classes, so it would be parallel to that study in which the fiction didn't come out. Students are reporting on, and teachers by the way, on mastery, social support, CSI, and intentions to seek for teacher, to ask the teacher for needed help, and interest in the teacher's class. Okay? Sure enough. Okay, this is the teachers now. Relational goal is predicting social support. Mastery goal is predicting CSI. And it's true that relational goal is also predicting CSI, but you know, that's a false coefficient. Students, again, ICCs are good. Student reports of social support and CSI do load on two distinct factors, you know, albeit correlated but distinct. And that's the case in home seeking and interest as well. So, the teacher goals differentially predicts student reports of teacher behaviors? Yes and no. Yes, relational goals, again, uniquely predicting social support. Mastery goals predicting CSI, which is good, but relational goals do as well. And here too, when we entered teacher reports of how much social support and cognitively stimulating instruction they do in those particular classes, didn't predict student reports of anything. What about student engagement? And here the picture is great, all right? Relational goals, notice we put in gender because guess who asks for more help? Girls. Good. Right answer. Relational goals predict intentions to ask the teacher for help with explanations. Mastery goals predict interest. Okay? Which is neat. There you go. And this is what the relation looks like. So relational goals predict help seeking. See that? Via perceptions of social support, CSI, and look particularly at the two differences. Very high percent the model is very high percent between class variance. Okay? And the mastery goals through cognitive stimulating instruction to interest. Again, mediation. So, time to talk about some stuff I didn't know what time to talk about. So, I will. You run until 1:30? So I should go for like another 10 minutes or so and then open things up. Yeah? All right. So yeah, goals for teaching do matter. Point for discussion is, do they matter more or differently or less than autonomous motivation? Would you believe I just had published a paper on autonomous motivation?
I can't believe it.
There you go. There you go. You see, people can change slightly. I actually started with SDGs, you know. Now, good goals are good for classroom behaviors and students. And there have been studies by some other people in Germany who've done multilingual stuff. They're also associated with students' mastery goals. That's good. Mastery may be better for teachers. Since I have a little time here, then I'll just show you this. Okay. In a sample of 400 something teachers, so relational goals at the, put it this way, mastery goals at the beginning of the year were associated with interest in teaching at the end of the year, very strongly, and protected what's going out at the end of the year, and relational goals not. They weren't bad, but not. Okay. I think it's interesting that so far they're better predictors of classroom behavior as reported by students or perceived by students than teacher reports of their own behaviors. As I said before, why don't other goals have, or why do other goals have less effect on classroom behaviors and students? And I don't know, maybe it's moderated by student achievement in that students with different abilities are perceiving these performance practices as favorable as opposed to being unfavorable. And the only multi-level studies that we've done up to now have been done in 2 countries which are not very advanced in the high stakes testing, national curriculum kind of trends, which is Israel and Germany. And I wonder if that has something to do with it. Which brings us to, okay, so there are clearly better and less good teaching aids. And then one, as educators asked, what influences teaching aids? Now, at least as articulated by my mentor, Mr. Nichols, both use a kind of constructivist approach, and there are dispositions that develop over time, but these are responsive and develop in response to contexts, the degree to which context emphasize learning versus performance and ability. So we are just about to submit a fairly big study with 650 teachers nested in 42 schools, where our first question was, do achievement goals vary significantly between schools, or is this just a matter of individual teachers? And the answer for this sample for Israel is that they do, but only the bad ones.
I'm sorry, only one.
Only the bad ones.
Do you mean bad
Ability,
ones?
approach, and avoidance, work avoidance differ between schools. So in some schools, teachers are more ability-oriented and work-avoidant oriented than they are in others. The good goals don't. It's like point 4. That of course raises interesting questions about, so the good goals, they're purely dispositional, because teachers are already adults. Maybe.
What about leadership, the effect
what?
of leadership?
Well, so what actually we looked at, there you have it, is, so if they differ, we kind of expected the good goals to differ as well. Would this be a function, among other things, of school leadership? The degree to which, on the one hand, we had the good one, which we took from there and immediately adapted to principles. The degree to which the principles support the teacher accomplishment. In other words, if a teacher has a good idea, the principal will support and encourage it, and the principal really invests in helping teachers improve their teaching, those kinds of things. Versus what we call principal performance pressure, which is this principle values and evaluates teachers mainly according to the achievement of their students. This principle frequently compares our students' achievements with those of other schools and classes, all right? Which is, by the way, I think a very relevant dimension of principal leadership, which hasn't been actually systematically conceptualized or assessed. So we have a good scale for that. What was predicting the between-teacher variance in the bad goals was principal performance pressure. And interestingly, the good leadership didn't protect against that. One more sentence since we're onto this. We also found really interesting interaction effects. Principal performance pressure influenced the influence of support for teacher accomplishment. In that, when at high levels of perceived performance pressure, the good leadership support for teacher accomplishment started predicting bad ones. It's as if this kind of performance pressure swamped everything else, and such like that even principals who were supportive, this was interpreted as an ability cue rather than as a kind of development cue. Anyway, here, by the way, we've started to look at kind of the role of general values, Schwartz stuff, as maybe a kind of precursor. Other possibilities are teachers, experiences as students. What they bring to them about learning. Another thing that I think is really interesting to look at is kind of reciprocal teacher-student influences. For example, do teacher goals do they change and under what kind of circumstances? And how are their relational goals influenced by students? Because this is a reciprocal kind of relationship. And the same for other kinds of goals as well. So these are, of course, the things that one needs to look at with better designs than mine, which will include kind of longitudinal multi-measurement over time. Okay, now, this has very clear implications that I don't even have to elaborate here on accountability, teacher evaluation initiatives. Not good. And I think it also provides some really kind of empirical evidence for anyone who's looking for should I call it, in this particular struggle. Okay, so there are still interesting questions, and I also have concerns about current trends in motivation, in work, on teacher goals and on achievement goal theory altogether. And I'm just mentioning, a couple. So what has happened within achievement goal theory is that you went from two really psychologically meaningful and philosophically interesting kind of goals equals, task, go, or employee performance. And we've written about that also on verb. Two, a proliferation of sub-distinctions and sub-goals and so on and so forth. And that has really got out of control among camera here. In my humble opinion, that in the field of teacher motivation, some additional distinctions make sense, maybe. But once you're getting to 12 different goals, what can you do with 12 different goals? And of course, we now have a 3x2 AGT for teachers. Almeda has come out with 10 different goals. And of course, they always find that the model with lots and lots of goals fits better. But the lots and lots of goals don't really explain anything. So that is a development I find unfortunate. I've said it and I'll say it again. Really, part of this is convenience. It is really a drag collecting data. And there aren't existing data sets that have these kinds of data in them. But this is a real limitation. So people are basically asking the kinds of questions that you could answer given a single informant, single session kind of design. So the questions are really getting a bit boring and beginning to feel more and more like the same. Limited and oft repeated, a set of so-called outcome variables, rehashing not very fruitful lines of inquiry from students, multiple goals that we're looking for concrete, goal profiles now, all these kinds of things, and we already know that hasn't been really interesting for students, so, why should we do it? Just because we can, in a sense? And so, the aims and the objectives of a growing number of studies are really kind of empirical, which is okay, but not particular, and so not that interesting. Okay, I think that's enough. Thank you very much.
A couple of questions. One with the multi-level stuff, that gets really tricky and complicated. What we've been doing is...
I've been doing that stuff?
What we've been looking at is doubly latent multi-level models where the problem is that the factor structure at level 1 may or may not be the factor structure at level 2. And almost all of your research presented here, it's the level 2 factor structure that's critical, not the level 1. The level 1 is not particularly relevant. But you don't probably have a good handle on the level 2 unless you're aggregating up at the item level rather than the factor level. And that gets tricky to do because you need big samples and stuff like that. And so some of the issues that you're looking at may be that you don't have good discrimination among the factors at the level 2, even when you have the level 1. There are huge differences in the ICCs at different levels. I was quite amazed that the help seeking was so big, that the ICCs were so large with that.
No, they were.
I was surprised that they were as large as they were. I mean, I haven't seen.
Which ones? ICC 2?
Well, the ICC 1 even was
0.5?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, achievement in most of our studies is an ICC of 0.3, 0.4. Hardly ever do we see ICCs of anything that are as high as 0.5.
Interesting. That's interesting because, you know, as a latecomer to these kinds of analyses, and by no means an expert, so anyone wanting to follow up some of her stuff on my data, just come and talk to me, you know? So seriously.
The other issue is
That's interesting.
because of giving
Wait,
the open.
but all this, so your stuff on student evaluation of teachers, which is mainly at the college level,
Yeah.
but what kind of ICCs you get from there?
0.3-ish.
What? Ah. Oh.
And I know.
Wait, and you think that might be a methodological artifact? No.
I don't know. It just stood out as quite interesting. The
I'm
other,
looking at it and saying, well, that's not too much.
but also, but the concern was more whether the factor structure is the same at level
Yeah.
2,
Yeah,
and
no,
whether some of
I
the issues
hear
that
you.
you're talking about are because you've got so much multicollinearity at level 2 that you can't distinguish between the factors, even though they look distinguishable at level 1. That was one issue. The other one is that because you gave us an overview, you couldn't give us the details of the model, but there must be lots of interesting control variables that you haven't discussed. So I would imagine that these vary.
Actually not, but give me some ideas.
I
yes.
would imagine that these vary substantially as a function of discipline area. So I would imagine that that you get a different pattern of results in language courses than you would math and science courses, for example.
In terms of the goals, or in terms of the goals, actually, I don't think so.
Okay?
I don't think so.
That English teachers and math teachers have the same relational goals? I'd be surprised,
no,
but
that I have to. But listen
Yeah.
to this. What about? So I didn't put that up. But when I'm saying teachers, then this is Israel. We're talking about something like 90%, 88%, right? And I assumed from my work on gender that there would be a gender difference, right? Relational goals, obviously there should be a gender difference. No. Where there is the gender differences we already know, and that I find comforting, that the males are more ability approach, quite strongly so, and the females tend to be more mastery. But relational, no.
interesting.
So people are only starting to use that in studies in Canada, Australia, Germany, and interestingly, they're not finding it either. So this might be something to do about the kinds of men who go into and stay into teaching. Maybe that's the optimistic way of looking at it. But anyway, one thing that does make a difference is school level. If you're talking about elementary school or secondary school. And in Germany, it makes a difference if you're talking about, the gymnasium, school, the art school, or whatever they call it. Those things do make a difference.
That was the other thing I was going to say. It says track.
Now, the STEM, not STEM thing, I've done a couple of really little left-handed presentations on that. The group that's worst off in terms of motivation, good goals, also other things, interest in teaching and so on and so forth, are men teaching non-STEM fields. which makes sense.
I didn't hear that.
Men teaching non-STEM things.
Nonsense.
Yeah, it's, you know, by the same logic you think, if there's a man who really chose to teach history, then he must be really interested. Hi.
Hi. I asked you a question about the GOT.
No, yeah.
Oh, here.
Yes.
The sentence stem on the questionnaire is, I had a successful day when. And to me, that sounds less like a beginning of class goal, and more like a end of class outcome.
Oh.
So I was wondering why you phrased it that way. Why didn't my goal, my objective, why not just say that? I know there's a reason.
Yeah, I know. And this is something that I'm actually ambivalent about. The reason is simple, and the reason is called John Nichols. John Nichols, years ago, this is interesting. Who has not heard of John Nichols? To be honest. Well, that's fine. And all you people have? No. There you go. There you go. So, this is a whole other talk. But,
It's a talk worth giving.
yes. Yeah. John Nichols was someone originally from New Zealand who invented, in parallel with Paraguay, the kind of invented geographical theory. He wrote a wonderful book that I recommend to everyone called Competitive Ethos and Democratic Education. Wonderful. For him, the difference between what he called task or goals, or learning and performance goals, was, you know, what kind of success do you strive for? Success in terms of meaningful learning and development, or success in terms of proving high ability or trying to mask the fact that you might have high ability. And he came up with the first set of some measures of student motivation, and he started off with, okay? And one of the reasons, another reason why I went with that, actually not this one, I deleted it. Very interesting. Okay, so I'll just say. And another reason was I really wanted to put in work avoidance, which some people don't see as a goal at all, but a kind of a motivation. And I'm not dogmatic about that. But I do think that in the sense that it does actually direct behavior and thoughts, then there's something goal-like about it, you know. And that was hard to phrase in terms of, you know, I'm striving to not have to prepare classes or something like that. But as I say, I'm not wedded to that. Other people have developed measures, not just the ones with 500 goals, but, you know, a reasonable number of goals where they do use more directs. You know, I'm trying to, or I'm striving to, or it's important to, and here I have to say something which I'm not sure it really matters. In that, you know, it's the kind of the contents here, and so I don't think that the fact that it's not saying I am striving to kind of somehow means it's not a goal or something like that. I am reminded of jingle jangle and all that, you know. I'm not sure there's a difference. that reasonable answer?
Yeah, I really understand why you phrased it.
My question is, in general, your research showed that mastery goals predict teachers' own perception well, but not student perception in general.
Also student perceptions. It just depends on what.
But compared to, the relationship goal, so relationship will better predict student perception than mastery goal. I think that for me, it's because of the goal target is different. So mastery goal is the goal target is themselves, teacher themselves. That is why. Yeah, that is why the mastery goal predicted their own perception well rather than the student perception. But relationship goals, the target of relationship goal is students, towards students.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is why a student pursue better. Yeah, so I think that's the main reason. So it's like it's a little bit seems like if so, the goal construct is a little different. Mastery goal and relationship goal. So isn't it that it taps different psychological constructs? That is why they form somewhat differently.
Okay, so that is a subject of discussion in the literature, absolutely. So I'd actually like that, to open that up. Does anyone have any, views on that? Is this, can one look at on relational as a class of achievements, right? That's basically, I think, what you're asking and what people have been asking as well. My position, no. So, but I'd like, does anyone have any ideas about that or not really? No?
This is often
No?
a somewhat different tangent, so.
Okay.
I was looking at goal congruence. So students can have goals and teachers can have goals, and they can be congruent or not, and you can have interactions. And if you're performance oriented, are you better off in a performance oriented class or a mastery class? And you can measure teacher goals and student goals at time one.
Right.
And you can measure student goals and teacher goals and student perceptions of teacher goals at time two. And that would be a fascinating database to look at. And that would get at some of your reciprocal questions, reciprocal effect sorts of things and so forth.
Absolutely.
And whether or not you can get people to fill out all those questionnaires on two equations or not, I'm not sure, but probably.
You know how to do it? You need like a really, really, really good research coordinator. And you need a fair amount of money.
Or you go to China where people are much more receptive.
Right. Well, and actually, that's what I was doing this morning. I was Skyping with China. Not about this early childhood stuff. But we pay teachers. And
To participate.
To participate, we're kind of a bit sneaky about this. We pay them for participating to this. Okay, so first rounds, usually it's in staff meetings, mine missing 20 minutes of a boring staff meeting to, for the surveys and so on. And then, if they also complete the second questionnaire at the end of the year, then we pay them very much, $5. But that works.
Do you have intact classes?
Intact classes in the sense of
When you're talking about teachers in classes, are you talking about?
everyone who's in class on that day. So yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, from a student's perspective, whether or not a teacher is knowledgeable, they sometimes can't tell the difference, because if the teacher's up there muttering about something and they're going on about it in a high level kind of really intense manner and they can't relate to the student, So the lack of social connection between the teacher and the student means that the student is left behind. So no matter how great that teacher is at like being a master of whatever the subject, the student can not assess them as a good teacher. They'll sort of start evaluate that teacher as a bad teacher because they can't connect with the student. But once you can connect on that social level, then that's where the student goes, okay, this is a good teacher because I understand what's going on.
Yeah. Though again, and you know, I don't discount the kind of measurement issues we're talking about. But if we take these results at kind of face value for a minute, I think it's true. I think that the most important things, and this is no surprise, and people want to feel noticed, recognized, cared for, all that. And I think this is, the most basic thing in good relationships, and in students' kind of perspective, feelings about teachers, without a doubt. Now, they are also sensitive to things like, is this interesting? And there isn't a total halo effect here. I think that's what we're seeing. They can see a teacher as like being really supportive and trustworthy. And the teacher might be a bit boring. And so they'll still like her or him, probably. So what I'm saying is I think they do make distinctions. We're running over time. I know this. I know that just yet.
I'm not looking for you, I'm looking for myself because
Yeah.
I've just gotten a message I posted.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you to continue talking as long as people are here interested in hearing what you have to say.
Coming from education. Yes. Was this interesting for you?
Oh, very, very, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go.
In the student evaluation research, the driving factor is instructor enthusiasm.
Okay.
And there's a classic study called the Dr. Fox effect.
Yeah.
And this is that the student ratings are primarily a function of enthusiasm. But we're able to differentiate out into different factors. But the instructor enthusiasm and the Dr. Fox effect turned out to be a substantial predictor of exam performance following the Dr. Fox effect. So instructor enthusiasm predicted exam performance better than the number of questions on the exam that were covered in the lecture. All these things were experimentally manipulating. So teacher enthusiasm is critically important.
Guess what? We have teacher enthusiasm in there. I kind of forgot about it. Predicted by master goals.
By what?
By master goals. And you know what? I don't even.
What did mastery goals predict beyond enthusiasm?
So first of all, I don't know what happens when you add relational goals into the mix. And following what you said, I mean, my hunch is that it should be mastery predicting the few. But I don't know. You see, the measures of teacher enthusiasm, at least, from America, they're about, this teacher is really enthusiastic, this teacher really likes teaching. And I wonder, this is,
Generating more interest.
Is this enthusiasm, or is this like intrinsic, intrinsic motivation, or do you see what I mean?
Well, fitting with that, I think there's, I would say, considerable data in SDT when you have high pressure from administrators to get high performance outcomes in students. You have teachers who are less enthusiastic about teaching, who are less interested in teaching, who have higher burnout, We have students who are less intrinsically motivated, who are less engaged in class. In other words, there's a downhill trend from pressure at the top,
Send me some of that
as well as
stuff, you know?
pressure from the bottom. Also, when you have students who are
Yeah, there's
unenthusiastic, you
an
have
early study by, sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, you cited the Guy Roth one
Yeah,
from
right.
Israel. That's an early study
That's-
on that, but there's been some subsequent ones.
No, Guy Roth is
And I would also say
Yeah.
your study, I think, would be really relevant. I mean, your study, yes, yours would be very relevant to Ruth. but I think you should share
I'm
with them.
interested.
Yeah, I think
right,
you should share with them.
you maybe we'll have a chance for you to tell me about it. Administrative stuff, there's an old study they stopped by Pelletier.
Yeah, Pelletier, that's another one. Yeah.
That's, which
Yeah, which
looked at
shows
the pressure from
downhill
above
trend.
and pressure
And
from
there's
below.
been several
Absolutely.
studies, and that's one of the reasons that at least
I haven't found that many others.
I
by the
personally
way.
have been campaigning for a long time against high-stakes testing. I think it corrupts classroom practice. It takes people away from the relational goals that you would have in classrooms. I think it spoils our educational system wholly, and I think it's focused on such a narrow band of outcomes. It doesn't represent the real interest in things that would engage students in classrooms. That you know, many of our education systems are corrupted by this, and I think it dovetails with some of your findings.
I'm learning so much by cable fall off, but absolutely.
Not that I have an opinion on this.
Or anything else.
We've gone over time, and it's been wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and call a stop to it, but I'm happy for Ruth to entertain further questions and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to try and stop things, but I want to just formally thank Ruth for a very good presentation and a provocative set of question and answer period following. So thank you very much.